The richest people in the world. In the early 1920s, the Osage Nation in Oklahoma was thriving, a striking contrast to their history of displacement and suffering. Oil had been discovered beneath their land, transforming the Osage people into the wealthiest individuals per capita in the world. Towering mansions dotted the landscape, and luxury cars cruised along the dirt roads. Yet this wealth brought with it a sense of unease, as outsiders, eager to profit from the oil boom, swarmed into the region. The U.S. government, viewing the Osage as wards incapable of managing their own wealth, appointed white guardians to oversee their financial matters, an arrangement that left many Osage feeling powerless despite their fortune. Molly Burkhart, an Osage woman in her 30s, lived in a grand home with her husband, Ernest, a white man. Like many Osage families, Molly's family enjoyed the comforts of their oil wealth: fine clothing, expensive jewelry, and trips to distant cities. However, beneath the surface, Molly felt an increasing sense of dread. The community had grown suspicious, wary of the ever-growing number of opportunists surrounding them, from lawyers to businessmen who profited off the Osage fortune. One evening, Molly's sister, Anna Brown, vanished after a night of drinking and dancing. When Anna's body was found days later in a ravine with a gunshot wound to the head, the authorities brushed it off as another tragedy in a community that had grown accustomed to loss. The sheriff labeled it an accident, despite clear evidence suggesting foul play. But Anna's death wasn't an isolated event. Over the past few years, more and more Osage people had died under mysterious circumstances, whether from poisoning, suspicious illnesses, or apparent accidents. Each death seemed to lead nowhere, and the official investigations yielded little. For Molly, Anna's death was the breaking point. Her once large family was shrinking, and she suspected something far more sinister than mere misfortune. Though many Osage chose to stay silent, fearing retribution or further loss, Molly began to question the nature of the deaths. She sought answers in a climate of fear and distrust, unsure of whom to trust. But she couldn't shake the feeling that a powerful conspiracy was lurking just beneath the surface, targeting her family and others in her community for their wealth. The silent killers. As the death toll among the Osage Nation continued to rise, fear tightened its grip on the community. Molly Burkhart, now grieving the loss of her sister Anna, watched in horror as other family members also fell victim to mysterious deaths. Her mother, Lizzie, succumbed to a sudden, unexplained illness, and her cousin was found shot dead. It was clear that these were not random tragedies, but targeted killings. The Osage community whispered about a growing conspiracy, but fear kept many silent. The killers moved unseen, leaving no obvious trail, and those who might have had answers seemed powerless or unwilling to help. Molly began to suspect that the deaths were part of a calculated plot to steal the oil wealth that made the Osage people rich. While the Osage had legal ownership of their land and the oil beneath it, the U.S. government had imposed a system of guardianship, appointing white men to control the finances of wealthy Osage individuals. This system, meant to protect the Osage, only made them more vulnerable. Many Osage, including Molly's family, were assigned guardians who managed their money, and who, in many cases, appeared to be profiting from it. Molly's husband, Ernest Burkhart, tried to reassure her that everything would be fine, but she remained deeply suspicious. The local law enforcement offered little help. They dismissed the deaths as accidents or bad luck, fueling Molly's growing distrust. The sheriffs, bankers, and local officials seemed more interested in maintaining the status quo than in seeking justice for the Osage people. The Osage lived in fear. They knew they were being hunted, but they didn't know by whom or how to stop it. Each new death was met with a sense of helpless resignation. Molly's health began to deteriorate under the strain. She was not only grieving her family, but also fearing for her own life. As one of the wealthiest members of her tribe, she knew she could be next. Desperate for answers, Molly made a bold decision. If the local authorities wouldn't act, she would seek help from beyond. She reached out to the federal government, hoping that the newly formed Bureau of Investigation could unravel the deadly conspiracy that had turned the Osage Nation into a land of silent killers. The investigation, with the Osage murders spiraling out of control and local authorities doing little to intervene, Molly Burkhart's plea for help reached the federal government. In response, the newly formed Bureau of Investigation, later known as the FBI, assigned a seasoned lawman, Tom White, to lead the inquiry. A former Texas Ranger, White was known for his integrity and determination. He arrived in Oklahoma with a mission to uncover the truth behind the Osage killings and bring those responsible to justice. White quickly realized that the case was far more complex and dangerous than it appeared. The local system was deeply corrupt, with many powerful figures benefiting from the Osage wealth. Guardians, lawyers, businessmen, and even local law enforcement had vested interests in keeping the murders unsolved. As he delved deeper, White saw a dark conspiracy, one that seemed to reach into the highest levels of Osage society and beyond. To avoid tipping off the killers, White decided to conduct a covert operation. He assembled a small, trusted team of undercover agents, each tasked with infiltrating the community and gathering evidence without raising suspicion. These agents posed as ranchers, oilmen, and workers, quietly piecing together clues from those who had witnessed the deaths or had connections to the victims. Through meticulous work, they began to trace the origins of the crimes to a group of conspirators. At the center of the plot was William Hale, a prominent local cattleman who had ingratiated himself with the Osage, particularly Molly's family. He presented himself as a friend and protector of the tribe, but White's investigation revealed a more sinister side. Hale had orchestrated the murders for years, systematically eliminating wealthy Osage individuals to inherit their oil rights, using his influence to evade suspicion. His nephew, Ernest Burkhart, Molly's husband, was implicated as well, caught in Hale's web of greed and violence. As the investigation unfolded, White faced immense pressure. Powerful figures tried to obstruct his progress, and many locals were unwilling to testify out of fear of retaliation. But White's determination never wavered. Slowly, the pieces fell into place, and he gathered the evidence needed to expose the conspiracy. By the end of the chapter, White and his team had unraveled the dark web surrounding the Osage murders, leading to the arrest of Hale and his accomplices, setting the stage for a climactic trial that would reveal the full extent of the horrors inflicted upon the Osage Nation. The end of the flower moon with William Hale arrested and the conspiracy laid bare, the long-awaited trial began. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension, as the Osage people and the white community gathered to witness the reckoning. Hale, once a powerful cattleman and a supposed friend of the Osage, now stood exposed as the mastermind behind the murders that had devastated Molly Burkhart's family and many others. Beside him, his nephew Ernest Burkhart, Molly's own husband, sat accused as a key accomplice, having helped orchestrate the killings to claim the fortunes tied to Osage oil wealth. Molly, though heartbroken by the betrayal, attended the trial, seeking justice for her lost family. She had endured unimaginable grief, but her courage had brought the killers into the light. The evidence presented by Tom White and his team was overwhelming. White's investigation had revealed a chilling pattern. Hale had systematically plotted to murder wealthy Osage, using poisonings, shootings, and staged accidents to inherit their head rights, legal entitlements to the oil beneath Osage land. Ernest, manipulated by his uncle's greed and promises of wealth, had been complicit in the scheme, allowing his wife's family to be destroyed. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the trial was far from simple. Hale wielded considerable influence, and many feared that the justice system, corrupted by local power dynamics, would fail the Osage once again. But Tom White, standing firm in his resolve, presented his case with precision. Witnesses came forward, some testifying at great personal risk, and documents revealed the extent of Hale's manipulation. After a tense and grueling trial, the jury convicted William Hale and Ernest Burkhart of murder. For the first time, justice seemed within reach for the Osage Nation. Yet the victory was bittersweet. The trial had exposed not just the greed and malice of a few men, but a system that had allowed such horrors to persist. Molly's family could not be restored, and the Osage community would forever carry the scars of the brutal conspiracy. In the aftermath, Molly sought to rebuild her life, though the weight of loss was always present. The Osage people continued to fight for control of their own destiny, learning to navigate a world that had exploited and betrayed them. Though the killers had been brought to justice, the deeper wounds, those inflicted by systemic racism and greed, would take generations to heal. As the final flower moon of that dark chapter set, Molly stood in the quiet of the Oklahoma plains, the land that had once made her people rich, now a symbol of their resilience and survival. She knew their story, though marred by tragedy, would not be forgotten.